Imagine you and I are building a dictionary for a language no human has ever spoken before. Not a language for poetry, not a language for feelings, a language for structure itself. We walk through a vast landscape with a notebook in our hands, and every time we see something that can be publicly distinguished, something two honest people could, in principle, agree is different from something else, we ask one question. What is the smallest set of words we must be allowed to use so we can describe this without cheating? Episode 13b has been exactly that journey. We refuse to start with space, time, matter, forces, particles, laws, or any ready made furniture. We began with one severe token, phi, the cyclic order field, a rule that assigns every event a place on a circle, not as a substance, but as an ordering permission. Then we learn the discipline of speaking. No absolute phi, only invariant content. We learned how calculus is allowed only through local lifting, how branch cuts must be declared, how the first derivative word appears as a, the differential of the lifted phase, and how its three inseparable echoes must always travel together: cadence, texture, transport. We learned that local structure is finite jets, global structure is topology, and that honest talk requires domains, excisions, typing, degeneracy awareness, and explicit guards. Now we arrive at the last act of episode 13b, the completeness seal. This is not a claim about what the universe does. This is not a claim about dynamics or meaning or measurement or governance. This is a claim about vocabulary, about the alphabet we are allowed to use, and whether that alphabet is enough to spell every publicly distinguishable structure without smuggling in forbidden primitives. So let's install it as a story you can feel and a discipline you can't cheat. Picture a child learning language for the first time. At first, the child points and says single words: dog, tree, fire, water. Those are tokens, basic handles. Then the child learns to say big dog, wet tree, hot fire. Now the child can express local variation, how something changes near where they are standing. Then the child learns patterns that go beyond the local. If I walk around the tree and come back, it's still the same tree. Or if I tie a rope around a post, the rope remembers the loop. Now the child is not only naming things, the child is learning invariants, things that stay the same under allowed changes. That is what we have been doing in episode 13b. We have been teaching ourselves which words are allowed, what counts as a valid sentence, and which things survive honest redescription. And here is the question the completeness seal asks. Have we now collected enough primitive words that any new publicly distinguishable structure can be described as a combination of these words? And if not, what exactly would it mean to break the dictionary? To answer that, we need to say clearly what complete means in this context. Completeness here means this. If a structure is publicly distinguishable and purely structural, then it must be encodable using only three kinds of statements and the relations between them. First, local structure statements. These are the sentences we build from finite jets. A finite jet is simply the local signature of phi up to some declared depth. It's the way phi looks when you zoom into a point and collect a finite amount of derivative information. First order, second order, up to nth order, where n is explicitly stated. In audio language, a jet is a local Taylor-like description, but we never claim it's a global truth. We declare the patch, we declare the regularity type, we declare the depth, and we only speak what is licensed. So the first component of completeness is any local, publicly distinguishable structure must be expressible as a function of a finite jet of phi on a declared clean domain. Second, global structure tokens. This is where topology enters, and this is where cyclicity becomes powerful. When you go around the closed loop in a clean domain, the phase can come back with a memory. That memory is not a real number we treat as absolute. It is a topological token, winding, holonomy, defect charge, the integer and circle-valued invariants that survive all allowed deformations and all allowed redescriptions. In audio language, closure creates integers, loops carry memory, defects anchor that memory. So the second component of completeness is any global, publicly distinguishable structure must be expressible using winding, holonomy, defect charges, and their lawful composition and deformation rules. Third, linking and consistency constraints. This is the bridge between the local and the global. It is not enough to say, here is local jet data, and here are global charges. A complete language must also have the grammar that tells you which local patterns are compatible with which global topological tokens, and how multi-defect configurations constrain what loops are allowed to mean. In audio language, the local and global must agree at the seams, or else the sentence is not about reality, it's about a bookkeeping mistake. So the third component of completeness is any publicly distinguishable structure that ties local and global together must be expressible as a constraint relating finite jet sentences to topological invariants, including linking classes when multiple defects are involved. That's the complete picture of what we claim to be enough. Local. Finite jets on clean domains. Global. Winding, holonomy, defect charges. Linking. Lawful relations that bind them. Now we add the severity of the seal. If something cannot be encoded in these terms, then one of only three things is true. Either it was never publicly distinguishable in the first place, it was private, subjective, or not reproducible as a shared structural claim, or the language is incomplete, meaning we truly need to extend the PS0 vocabulary with a new primitive token, and we must prove that no rewriting within the existing tokens can capture it. Or it belongs to a later layer, not language but dynamics or semantics or governance, which we have explicitly forbidden from entering here. That's the seal. And it is powerful because it turns the vague, maybe we need new physics impulse into a disciplined, typed question. Is this a new structure, or a misuse of grammar, or a story from a different layer? Now, because episode 13b is firewalled, we must embed the four gates, not as a list, but as living discipline. So let me speak them into the story as rules you can hear and rules you can enforce. First, the well-formedness gate. If someone says, I have found a new primitive, we do not respond with applause. We respond with a demand for grammar. We say, show me the sentence, show me the domain, show me the jet order, show me the typing, show me how it avoids illegal operations at degeneracies, show me the guard conditions, and then show me the reduction attempt. Because a new primitive is not a vibe. It is a claim that cannot be admitted unless it is written as a precise sentence in the language. And here is the key discipline. Any proposal for a new primitive must come with a full reduction attempt into PS0 tokens. Not a story, not an analogy, not a motivational speech. A reduction attempt. Here is the candidate structure. Here is how I try to express it as a function of finite jets and topological invariants, undeclared domains, respecting all equivalences. And here is where the attempt fails. That's the entry ticket for novelty. Second, the invariance gate. Even a beautiful reduction attempt is worthless if it depends on a particular description. In episode 13b, meaning is never the coordinate expression. Meaning is the equivalence class. So any reduction must survive all admissible redescriptions. Shifts of phase by a constant, different choices of lift, changes of patch charts, movements of branch cuts, and homotopic deformation of loops in clean domains. In audio language, if your new structure disappears when you rephrase it honestly, it was not structure, it was notation. This is why the completeness seal is automatically triunity respectful, because cadence, texture, and transport are not independent gods. They are three shadows cast by one change word, A. So if someone claims a time structure that cannot be expressed as a jet or topology token of A, we do not say, wow, new time. We say, either you are smuggling time as a primitive, or you are talking about dynamics, or you have found a genuine basis breaking structure. Prove which. Third, the domain gate. This is where a lot of fake universes are born. People speak globally without declaring where the sentence is valid. But our language is typed. Our derivative talk only lives on clean domains. Our operations often require guards. Degenerate sets carve the domain into regimes. So any counterexample to completeness must declare its domain and guards. No vague claims like this is true everywhere. No global untyped challenges. If you can't name where your structure lives, on the clean domain excluding degeneracies, on the degeneracy set, in a domain punctured by defects, or across mixed domains with explicit guards, then your counterexample is not a sentence. It is just noise. Fourth, the non-encodability challenge. This is the ultimate gate, the final sword. It says, if you want to break this language, you must exhibit a publicly distinguishable structure that cannot be encoded by any combination of finite jet sentences, topological invariants, and their lawful relations, even after allowing generator changes, basis changes, and reparameterizations that preserve meaning. In other words, you don't get to say the basis we chose is wrong. A basis is just a coordinate choice inside the same content. So the challenge is not, I can't express it in my favorite basis. The challenge is, I can't express it in any basis by any rewrite while staying inside PS0 tokens and respecting all equivalences. That is the only legitimate way to force a language extension at the structural level. Now I want you to feel why this matters by seeing it across scales. Not as a dump of examples, but as a single rhythm repeated in different worlds. In everyday life, think about advice. Someone tells you, just be yourself. That sounds like a universal law, but it hides domain conditions: safety, context, social power, timing, audience. When the advice fails, people conclude the world is irrational. But what happened is simpler. The speaker used an operation without its guard. Holophase calls that a fake universe, a sentence pretending to be global when it is local. So the first discipline of completeness in everyday life is, before you invent new mystical causes, check whether your language was incomplete or your guards were missing. In history, consider evolutions. A society collapses, and suddenly the old rules stop working. People say, nothing makes sense anymore. But often what happened is not that reality broke, it's that the domain changed. The old grammar of institutions depended on conditions that no longer hold: legitimacy, stable enforcement, shared trust. When those conditions vanish, the same sentences become undefined. The correct response is not to add a magical force to history. The correct response is to type the domain and choose a grammar that is valid in that regime. That is exactly what our language does with degeneracy and guards. In biology, consider a cell. Most of the time, the cell's behavior can be described by stable patterns: regulation loops, feedback, homeostasis. But then the cell enters a critical regime. Stress, mutation, infection, and the same normal assumptions fail. The system crosses a boundary where previous approximations are not valid. Again, the honest response is not to say biology has exceptions. The honest response is the domain changed. The grammar must declare its domain and guards. Now bring it back to our episode 13b claim. The completeness seal is the promise that at the level of pure structural description, we have already included the right kind of dictionary words, so that when something looks new, we can diagnose it without panic. Here is the prediction of the completeness seal. Not an empirical prediction, but a grammatical one. Any attempt to drift outside the language will be caught, because any real structural content will either reduce to the existing tokens, or it will pinpoint exactly what new token is required and why it cannot be encoded as a rewrite. This is crucial. It means the language is not brittle. It is audit-friendly. It does not rely on authority. It relies on reduction and invariance. Now we must also say the falsifier, the only legitimate way to defeat the seal. The falsifier is not, I feel like this is missing. The falsifier is not, I have an intuition that reality is richer. The falsifier is, exhibit a publicly distinguishable structure, purely structural, domain-typed, guard-honest, that cannot be encoded by any combination of finite jet sentences, topological invariants, and their lawful relations under all admissible changes of description and basis. If you can do that, you have not merely extended holophase. You have proven episode 13b incomplete at the language level. And that would be one of the most important discoveries imaginable, because it would mean the alphabet of structural reality has an extra letter we did not know. Now, to make this seal feel like something you can carry in your bones, let's return to the dictionary metaphor, but tighten it so it stays PS0 clean. Imagine we have a dictionary with a strict rule. Only certain kinds of words are allowed. We allow words that describe local shapes of phi up to finite depth, inside declared clean domains. We allow words that describe loop memory, winding and holonomy, and the integer charges that defects force upon us. We allow words that describe how these relate, composition, homotopy invariance in defect-free domains, linking classes when multiple defects exist, and compatibility constraints between local jet patterns and global tokens. We do not allow words like particle, force, mass, spacetime, energy as substance, or law of motion. Those belong to later layers. Now someone walks in and says, I have a new word. We ask, can your word be defined using our dictionary? They try. If they succeed, then the word was not a new primitive. It was a compound, a new sentence made from old tokens. If they fail, we ask, is your word publicly distinguishable, or is it private? If it is private, it does not enter the dictionary. If it is public, we ask, is it really structural, or does it belong to later layers, dynamics, semantics, governance? If it belongs to later layers, we do not admit it as a new structural primitive. We place it in the proper layer later. Only if it is public and structural, and only if every attempt to reduce it fails under all equivalencies, do we admit the dictionary is incomplete and we must extend the alphabet. That is the completeness seal. It is not arrogance. It is humility with teeth. It says, we refuse to hallucinate new ontology when the true cause is bad grammar, hidden guards, or domain mistakes. But we also refuse to dismiss genuine novelty if it survives every reduction attempt. Now I want to bring the triunity into this final seal one last time, because this is where many theories silently cheat. People love to build worlds while time is fundamental, or space is fundamental, or motion is fundamental. Holophase forbids that at language level. Cadence, texture, and transport, omega, kappa, nu, are not gods. They are readouts, shadows of A. So the completeness seal says, any structural talk about time-like, space-like, or motion-like features must be encodable through A's jet structure and global topology on declared domains with explicit guards at degeneracies. If you claim a time structure that cannot be rewritten back into A and the allowed tokens, then one of three things is happening. You are smuggling a forbidden primitive, or you are talking about dynamics, not structure, or you are presenting a genuine challenge to completeness, and you must prove it. That is how the seal protects us from drift. Now let me end with a human image, because episode 13b has always tried to be severe without becoming cold. Picture a weaver. They have a finite set of threads, a few colors, a few materials. From those threads, they can weave an endless variety of carpets. When a new carpet pattern appears, the weaver does not panic and claim a new substance has entered the world. They ask, is this a new combination of threads I already have, or do I truly need a new thread? That's the difference between creativity and delusion. Holophase is that weaver, but at the level of structural language. Our threads are phi, local lifts, the change word A, finite jets on declared domains, and the global tokens of loops and defects. Episode 13b ends by saying, for pure structure, these threads are enough to weave any pattern that is publicly distinguishable. And if you find a pattern you cannot weave with them, you have discovered either a missing thread or you have wandered into a different craft entirely. That is the end of episode 13b, the end of the beginning. We are not yet telling the universe what to do. We are not yet writing the story of change. We are not yet speaking dynamics. We have done something more basic and more dangerous. We have frozen the alphabet so we cannot cheat later. And the one sentence I want you to carry out of this part is this. If a structure is real in the public sense, then it must be spellable using local finite jets on honest domains, global loop memory tokens, and the lawful relations that bind them. And if it is not spellable, then we have found one of three things. A boundary of public meaning, a boundary between layers of description, or a genuinely new letter in the alphabet of reality. That is the completeness seal. One personal note, my Rafik. Existence is dazzling. Understanding it is breathtaking. The experience of learning, of slowly seeing how the pieces fit together, goes beyond familiar emotions and beyond ordinary words. There is a quiet intensity to it, a widening of awareness that feels deeper than excitement and more stable than awe. To weave a coherent picture of reality is, to me, the highest form of spirituality. Not belief, not surrender, but understanding. Not escape from the world, but deeper contact with it. The act of seeing structure clearly, of tracing how local patterns, global loops, and their relations form a single fabric, feels like reverence enacted through clarity. This is why it surpasses states that promise release or disappearance. Any such state can only arise through expanded awareness, and awareness expands through understanding. There is no other path. The more we learn, the wider the horizon becomes. The more the horizon widens, the more reality reveals itself. Not as mystery to be worshipped blindly, but as depth to be approached honestly. So we continue our weaving. In the next episode, we step beyond pure language and allow structure to move. Episode 14 awaits. Always, peace be upon you.